Well, I think as a kid, like so many children, I liked art and I liked drawing. And somehow I just emerged from an environment that really wasn't very artistic and became an artist when I decided to be an artist when I was 17. So when I made that decision when I was 17, there was no looking back. I mean, I was just determined, and I was blessed to have two parents that did not try to have a heavy influence on what I should do. They just said whatever. When I was real little, like probably from when I was 2 years old to 8 or 9 years old, at that time, my mother would take my grandmother and my great-grandmother on Sunday afternoon drives in the countryside to kind of get them out of their house. And I think that seeing so much landscape at an early age like that kind of imprinted my mind. And I've always been attracted to the landscape, and the trees kind of emerge out of that landscape experience. Kentucky, the state of Kentucky and the Nashville Basin, where I grew up, is known throughout the world by botanists and for people who study trees, as certainly in the United States, is the most concentrated area of what is referred to as woodland pasture trees. And that is trees in a field with land around it. So many of my drawings and so many of my paintings are titled Tree in an Open Field, and that's what I grew up seeing, and that's so much of what I'm pulled to. But it's just amazing the area that we live in, how much of that we have, but it's not everywhere, but it's concentrated here. Well, often I'll find the tree myself just by driving around, or someone tells me about a tree, and then sometimes I do commissions. Someone will call me and say, I have this incredible beech tree that's in the back of the farm where I live. Will you come and let's talk about doing a drawing or a painting of it? So sometimes I'm guided to trees that way, through people commissioning me to do a drawing or painting of it, and then I find them myself. But often, I'll walk around the tree, I look at it from different angles. Sometimes branches are in the way at one angle and they work much better at another angle. So all that goes into consideration. But as an artist and as a person, I have defined myself through drawing, and drawing directly on site, not by photographs. But that's how I've sort of defined myself as an artist and a person. So it starts with studying the tree and doing those drawings. I mean, I study it, I take photographs of it, I sit there and look at it, I sit there and draw it, I walk around it and look at different views. And sometimes they do, and then sometimes, if we're talking about trees, some trees work better closer up. It may have a wonderful root base or trunk that's very dynamic. So that's more typical of trees in an old forest. And then we have woodland pasture trees, which are trees in a field. And those usually have wonderful branchology, what I refer to as branchology, or the structure. And most of the time, those work better in winter or without trees, or in late fall or early spring, because often so many wonderfully dynamic trees in the summer are just a big green blur, and we don't see that wonderful branch structure, or what I refer to as branchology. Initially, when I'm drawing, I don't even think about color. I'm just seeing it from a structural standpoint, trying to understand which limbs come forward, which limbs go back, which limbs are kind of in the mid-range. So very often when we look at trees and we study trees, the value and detail of the limbs are all the same, so it's very deceptive. So I have to kind of go in and interpret in a more definite way which limbs are coming forward, which limbs are going back, and which limbs may be sort of in a mid-range area, so that I am able to create dimensional space within the context of that tree. So it's very deceptive just to look at it, and it can be very confusing, or like a road map that we're looking at. But as I look at the tree, I have to kind of define all those spatial concerns. And then color does, if I do a drawing, it's more about value. And then if I do create a painting based on that drawing, then there are color considerations, like more intense colors. Brighter, more intense colors come forward. Softer, grayer, muted color recedes to the eye. So I do have those type of considerations. But in the life of creating a painting or a sculpture or a drawing or anything like that, there's sort of three stages. One will be that initial stage when you kind of carve it out, you have the idea, and you're sketching it in on the canvas, or you're sculpting it out of stone or clay, and you're all inspired and you're excited and you think that it's wonderful. But then at some point that stage stops and you're kind of in the battlefield. So you're wrestling with the image to make it work. And that battlefield can be long, or it can be broad and deep, or it can be short and narrow. It just depends on every painting. But once you work through some of those challenges, probably the most rewarding part for me in that process is knowing that I've met those challenges and I've worked through all those issues. Some of these paintings I might do in a month or 2 months, and then some take me years. I may, have as much as 300, 400, 500 hours in one painting. I would hope that people like my work, or they love my work. But I have to find a way to move forward if they don't. So anyway, I hope that as people view the work, they find it to be transformative. And that is made possible through this strong commitment of time and energy and passion and drive about the subject. So in theory, all wonderful artwork must contain some small measure of metaphysical property. And I don't know how large that particle is or how small that particle is, but that's something that I hope emerges from the experience that I go through. And true creativity, whether it's biblical or from some of the 20th century's greatest philosophers, from Camus to Kierkegaard, true creativity is defined as the ability to move forward despite problems or issues. It's that ability that someone has to move forward despite problems or issues in their life, not without having them. So anyone can make it in this life if they've got plenty of money and they've got good health and they've got good relationships. All you've got to do is just roll out of the bed in the morning and get up and go. You can make it. It's people, which is the reality of life, that have challenges, and we find a way to move forward despite those, that really marks true creativity.